Hi, I'm Alex Newman with the New American Magazine, and today I want to talk to you about a whopper from Miss Betsy DeVos, who is our Secretary of Education in the Trump administration. So, Secretary DeVos has been saying a lot of really great things, and her latest speech delivered not too long ago was no exception. In fact, she talked about the disaster that federal intervention has been in education. She talked about the disaster under Bush, right? No Child Left Behind. Talked about the disaster under Obama with Common Core. But then came the whopper. She said Common Core at the Department of Education is dead. And of course, Common Core is not dead, whether at the Department of Education or anywhere else. In fact, Common Core is as firmly entrenched as ever. It's been renamed in a few places, right? In Florida, it's the Sunshine State Standards, and in Indiana, it's the Indiana State Standards. But these are all Common Core, repackaged, rebranded, but functionally exactly the same thing. So the idea that Common Core is dead anywhere, much less at the Department of Education, is ludicrous, and it's totally false. In fact, Betsy DeVos should know better. Under the Every Student Succeeds Act, which, you always, when the government names a bill something, you always need to realize they're probably talking about the opposite, right? The Patriot Act is the unpatriotic act, right? The Affordable Care Act is going to be the unaffordable non-care act, right? And so the Every Student Succeeds Act is no different. What this does is it, among other things, cements Common Core into place by mandating, college and career-ready standards, which is code language in education circles for Common Core. And it also purports to give the Secretary of Education, the U.S. Secretary of Education, the power to approve or deny standards that states put forward. Now, this is ludicrous, right? I mean, the word education, you can search the Constitution all day. You'll never find the word education in there. And that's because the founders never imagined in a million years that the federal government would someday be even involved in education, much less approving or denying state standards. And so when DeVos says Common Core is dead at the Department of Education, she's flat out not telling the truth. In fact, she and presumably her subordinates have been rubber stamping Common Core standards from every state that submitted them for a year now. So I don't know who she thinks she's kidding. It's not the first time she's told us that Common Core, last time she said it was no longer an issue, right? Of course it's still an issue. It's not the only issue. It may not even be the most important issue, but it's certainly an important issue. Common Core, for those who don't remember, is a set of national education standards. It was supposedly developed by the states, but it really wasn't. It was developed by the insiders. They created a front group called Achieve Inc. And through a couple of lobbying organizations, the National Governors Association, which is partly funded by the federal government, by the way, and the Council of Chief State School Officers, another lobbying group, front group, partially funded by the federal government. The federal government also funded the tests for the Common Core, which is like the enforcement mechanism, and they funded every step of the process. So the federal government has been intimately involved in this. The Obama administration used bribe money from Race to the Top that was granted under the stimulus bill to coerce states and bully states and bribe states into imposing this abomination on their states and on their pupils. And so Common Core is very much still alive. And I say this all the time. Education is one of my passions because I realize that if we lose on the education front, we lose on all the battles, right? I mean, if they brainwash, what do they have, 80% of the kids in government schools, America's done, right? I mean, the voters of the next generation will vote themselves into slavery. We don't even need to worry about, what the politicians might do. If they succeed in brainwashing the youth, it's all over. Your gun rights, right to life, all of it out the window. And so this is a crucial battle. And I say this all the time. Common Core is not the only problem. It's not the beginning of the problem, and it's not the end of the problem. It is a problem, and we have an opportunity to use this as an issue to make parents aware of what's going on in the schools. But we need to recognize that the government schools have been a disaster for decades, for generations at this point. And there was an organized effort. People like John Dewey and his far left utopian, communist, humanist, socialist, evolutionist colleagues got together and decided to dumb down the American people. They brought in a reading program that was exposed as quackery 150 years ago, and this is why we have an illiteracy crisis in America. Common Core, of course, entrenches this, right? It actually mandates that this quackery be taught in kindergarten. They get the kids memorizing words. Absolute disaster. That's why more than half of the kids in California are not even proficient in reading. That's why 67 or 68% of adults in Washington, D.C. are functionally illiterate. So they know all this very well. Common Core didn't cause all this, although Common Core is contributing to the problem. And what we need to do first is say, you know what? We want honesty in government. If you don't like Common Core, that's great. But don't tell us that Common Core is dead at the Department of Education when you know very well it's not dead. It's alive and well, and it's still eating out the minds of our youngsters, and it needs to stop. So we need to go back to the model of local control over education. We don't need the federal government, as Betsy DeVos quite properly said, we don't need the federal government making these decisions, telling our teachers what to do, deciding what our students need to learn. What we do need is for the federal government to obey the Constitution. We need to shut down the Department of Education. Trump talked about this on the campaign trail. Ronald Reagan talked about this. It's time to actually do it. There's legislation in the House of Representatives introduced by Thomas Massey to wind down the Department of Education by the end of 2018. It's time for this to happen. So I'm Alex Newman with The New American. Please check back here regularly. Check out the links below, and thanks for watching.